Jake Webb was elbow-deep in a broken plasma coil when he heard the humming sound. Not the good kind of humming like when an engine finally runs smooth. This was the nervous kind. The kind that meant trouble was walking through his salvage yard gate. He wiped the grease off his hands with an old rag and looked up. 3 aliens stood at the entrance, and they looked like giant praying mantises wearing fancy robes. Crithians. He'd seen pictures but never met one in person. Their translator boxes clicked in Word, trying to convert their language into something he could understand. "Are you Jake Webb? The mechanic?" the tallest one asked. Its voice came out choppy through the translator. "That's me. What can I do for you?" The 3 aliens looked at each other. Even with their bug faces, Jake could tell they were nervous. Real nervous. The lead one stepped forward, its 4 arms fidgeting with its robe. "We need you to fix something. Something very important. Our Guardian." Jake scratched his head. "The Guardian? You mean that giant robot thing I heard about? The one that's supposed to protect your whole planet?" "Yes. It is millennia old. Our most sacred protector. It has been dormant for 3 cycles now. Our best technomancers have tried everything. Nothing works. And you're coming to me because?" The Crithian looked embarrassed. At least Jake thought it looked embarrassed. Hard to tell with aliens. Everyone else refused the job. "You are known in this sector for unconventional repairs. You fix things others say cannot be fixed." Jake couldn't help but grin. "You mean I'm cheap and I'll try anything? Got it. What's the pay?" They named a figure that made his eyes go wide. "Apparently, when your entire civilization is about to die, you don't haggle over price." "All right, I'm in. When do we start?" "Now, please. The enemy gathers at our borders. Without the Guardian, we have perhaps 2 weeks before invasion." 20 minutes later, Jake stood in the biggest hangar he'd ever seen. And in the middle of it, like some kind of crystal god, stood the Guardian. It was massive. 50 feet tall, maybe more. Its body looked like it was carved from purple and blue crystal, but mixed with metal he didn't recognize. Ancient circuits ran through it like veins. The whole thing hummed with power even though it was supposedly dead. Around the Guardian, a dozen Crithian technomancers stood in a circle. They wore elaborate robes covered in symbols. When they saw Jake walk in with his beat-up toolbox, their faces twisted with disgust. Well, he assumed it was disgust. Again, bug faces were tricky. "This is the human?" one of them said, not even trying to hide the contempt in his voice. "This is an insult to the Guardian. He carries primitive tools." Jake set down his toolbox with a thud. He pulled out his plasma torch, some fiber optic cables, his scanner, and yeah, a roll of duct tape. The Crithians actually gasped when they saw the tape. "Look," Jake said, "you guys had your shot. Your fancy magic or whatever didn't work. Now it's my turn. Either let me work or find someone else." The lead diplomat nodded quickly. "Please. Proceed. We are desperate." Jake walked around the Guardian, running his scanner over its surface. The Crithians watched every move he made like he was about to commit murder. He could hear them whispering to each other, their translators clicking softly. They thought he was crazy. Maybe he was. But here's the thing about Jake. He'd grown up fixing broken things. His dad ran a repair shop back on Earth, and Jake learned early that sometimes the fancy solution isn't the right solution. Sometimes you just need to think different. While these aliens were treating the Guardian like some holy relic, Jake saw it for what it really was. A machine. A complicated, ancient, crystalline machine, sure. But still a machine. He traced the power conduits with his scanner. There. He could see where the energy was getting stuck. 3 major systems were blocking the flow, systems the Crithians probably thought were essential. He pulled out his plasma torch. "What are you doing?" a technomancer shrieked. "My job. You might want to step back." Jake cut through the first conduit and rerouted it through a makeshift relay he built on the spot. The Crithians were practically vibrating with horror. He bypassed the second system entirely. Then he did something that made them gasp out loud. He jury-rigged a connection using parts from his toolbox and yes, duct tape, creating a bridge that the Guardian's original builders never intended. "You cannot do this. You are violating sacred protocols. The Guardian will." The Guardian's eyes suddenly flared bright blue. Energy rippled across its crystalline body like lightning. The whole hangar shook. Every Crithian dropped to their knees. Even Jake took a step back. The massive construct's head moved. Its arms flexed. Ancient servos whined to life. After 3 cycles of silence, the Guardian was waking up. And Jake had absolutely no idea what was going to happen next. The Guardian's massive head turned slowly, and Jake felt like he was being watched by something beyond his understanding. The crystal eyes, each one the size of his torso, locked onto him. Then it spoke, and the voice wasn't just sound. It was like thunder rolling through his chest, like crystal bells ringing in his skull. Who awakened me? Jake's mouth went dry. Every Crithian in the hangar had dropped to their knees, heads bowed. But Jake just stood there, toolbox still in hand, trying to process what was happening. That'd be me. Jake wept. I'm a mechanic. Before he could say anything else, the Guardian's eyes blazed white-hot. A beam of pure light shot out and hit Jake square in the face. He tried to move, tried to run, but his body wouldn't respond. The light wrapped around his head like warm honey. Then things got weird. Jake felt pressure building behind his eyes. Not painful exactly, but intense. Like someone was gently pushing into his brain. And then he felt something vast and ancient moving through his memories like fingers flipping through a photo album. He saw himself as a kid 8 years old, taking apart his first car engine in his dad's garage. He remembered the triumph when he finally got it running. The memory shifted, and now he was 22, staring at a fusion reactor that everyone said was dead. He'd fixed it with chewing gum and a prayer, and it had worked for another 5 years. His mom's voice echoed through his mind, telling him he could fix anything if he just looked at it the right way. Every mistake he'd ever made, every success, every stupid joke, every moment of fear and courage. All of it was being scanned, analyzed, understood. The light faded as quickly as it came. Jake stumbled backward, gasping for air. His legs felt like jelly. One of the Crithian technomancers caught him before he hit the ground. What the hell was that? Jake wheezed. The Guardian stood silent for a moment, processing. Then it spoke again, and this time there was something almost like excitement in that booming voice. Analysis complete. This one shows adaptive chaos. The trait of ancient warriors. The trait we were built to seek. The lead Crithian diplomat practically jumped forward, his forearms spread wide. Guardian. We are honored by your awakening. We require your protection. The enemy masses at our borders. We need. No. That single word hit like a physical blow. The diplomat froze mid-sentence. Guardian, I don't understand. We are Crithian. You are sworn to protect us. It is your purpose. Your sacred duty. You are stagnant. Bound by tradition. Paralyzed by fear of change. You have bred the fire out of your species. The hangar went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the metal floor. The Guardian's head tilted down, looking at Jake again. I have chosen this human as my bondmate. I serve him now. Chaos erupted. Crithians started shouting in their own language, their translators struggling to keep up. The technomancers looked like they might faint. The diplomat was making choking sounds. And Jake just stood there, trying to figure out if he was having a really weird dream. Then he felt it. Something clicked into place in his mind. Like a door opening in a room he didn't know existed. And suddenly there was a presence there. Not controlling him, not taking over, just there. Huge and ancient and curious. And it was talking to him. Not out loud. Inside his head. Hello, Jake wept. You fixed me with adhesive tape and sheer audacity. I find this absolutely delightful. Jake actually laughed. He couldn't help it. The situation was so insane that laughter was the only reasonable response. Oh man. This is going to be so complicated. The next hour was a blur of shouting Crithians. The lead diplomat called in the council. More fancy-robed aliens showed up, all demanding that Jake sever the bond immediately. They offered him money. They offered him ships. One of them even offered him an entire moon if he'd just walk away. But the Guardian wouldn't budge. Every time they demanded something, it gave the same answer. The human stays or I return to sleep. Forever. Jake found himself sitting on a crate, watching aliens argue about his fate. The Guardian stood motionless, but through their connection, Jake could feel it was amused by the whole thing. Finally, when the shouting died down, Jake stood up and walked over to the massive construct. He had to crane his neck way back to look at its face. Okay, I gotta ask. Why me? I'm just a guy who fixes stuff. These people have been protecting you for thousands of years. Their whole civilization revolves around you. And you pick some random human mechanic you just met. The Guardian's eyes dimmed slightly, becoming less intense. When it spoke this time, the voice was quieter. Still loud, but not ear-splitting. Because you see problems as puzzles to solve, not prophecies to fear. You adapt. You improvise. You break rules not out of disrespect, but because you understand that rules are tools, not chains. The Guardian paused, and Jake felt a wave of something through their bond. Sadness? Loneliness? These traits have been lost among the stars. The elder races grew old and careful. They stopped taking risks. They stopped innovating. They forgot how to be creative in the face of the impossible. Another pause. But humanity still carries the fire. That spark of chaos that solves problems no one else can solve. You fixed me not because you understood my systems better than the technomancers. You fixed me because you were willing to try something they thought was impossible. Jake looked down at his hands, still stained with grease and burn marks from the plasma torch. He thought about all the times he'd been told something couldn't be fixed. All the times he'd proven them wrong. So what happens now? He asked. Now, Jake Webb, we become partners. And I think we are going to have quite an adventure. 2 days later, Jake found himself sitting in the Galactic Assembly Hall, and he'd never felt more out of place in his entire life. The chair was built for something twice his size, so his feet barely touched the floor. Around him, holographic representatives from 100 different species flickered and buzzed. Some looked like giant squids. Others were just balls of light. One looked like a floating rock with eyes. And they were all arguing about him. This is unacceptable, a voice boomed from one of the holograms. Jake thought it was some kind of bird creature but with 3 heads. Humans are a level 2 civilization. They've barely been in space for 300 years. The Guardian is a weapon of mass destruction, another voice chimed in. This one sounded like grinding metal. Giving it to a species this young sets a dangerous precedent. What's next? Handing nuclear codes to children? Jake slouched in his chair trying to look smaller. He'd rather be back in his salvage yard, covered in grease, fixing a broken speeder. This political stuff made his head hurt. Ambassador Beth Garrett stood at the human podium, her back straight, her voice calm. The Guardian chose Jake Webb according to ancient law. The law that every species in this assembly agreed to uphold. We don't get to ignore laws just because we don't like the outcome. A reptilian delegate, covered in green scales, hissed loudly. Ancient law. Outdated law. Written when the universe was different. That law should be changed. Then change it, Beth shot back. But you can't apply new rules to something that already happened. The bond exists. Deal with it. The arguing went on for 3 more hours. Jake stopped paying attention after the first 30 minutes. Instead, he focused on the presence in his mind. The Guardian was back on the Crithian homeworld, but their connection didn't care about distance. They're quite loud, aren't they? The Guardian's voice echoed in his thoughts. Tell me about it, Jake muttered under his breath. Do they always talk this much? In my experience, politicians of every species share one trait. They prefer talking to doing. Jake snorted, earning a few strange looks from nearby delegates. He didn't care. While the assembly argued, Jake spent his free time learning to work with his new partner. The neural link was strange at first. Like having someone else's thoughts sitting in the corner of his brain. Not controlling him, just there. Watching. Commenting. Sometimes making jokes that only he could hear. The Guardian showed him things through the link. Combat techniques from civilizations that died out 1,000,000 years ago. Strategic patterns used in wars Jake couldn't even pronounce. Weapon systems that bent physics in ways that made his head spin. It was like having the universe's most advanced combat computer downloaded directly into his skull. In return, Jake showed the Guardian what it meant to be human. He played it blues music through his phone, and felt the ancient being's surprise at how sound could carry emotion. He showed it comedy videos trying to explain why humans laughed at stupid things. He shared memories of his dad's garage, the smell of motor oil and coffee, the satisfaction of fixing something everyone said was broken. Your species fights without honor codes, the Guardian observed one day as Jake showed it footage of human military tactics. We fight to win, Jake replied, munching on a sandwich. Honor's great and all, but living is better. Dead heroes don't get to see tomorrow. Fascinating. My previous bondmates would be scandalized by this philosophy. They believed in noble combat. Facing enemies with dignity. How many bondmates have you had anyway? 417. You are the first in 10,000 years. I had begun to believe I would never bond again. Jake felt a wave of emotion through the link. Deep, aching loneliness. The kind that came from watching everyone you cared about grow old and die over and over again while you stayed the same. Centuries spent in sleep between bonds. Millennia of isolation. That sounds really rough, buddy. It was. But this is different. You make me laugh, Jake Webb. I had forgotten that was possible. They trained together in the Crithian combat yards. Jake would think of crazy ideas, and the Guardian would execute them with precision. Using asteroid fields as kinetic weapons. Bouncing laser fire off planetary rings. Strategies that made the Crithian military advisors clutch their heads in horror. You can't just throw a moon at an enemy fleet. one general shouted. Why not? Jake asked. If it works, it works. The Guardian, freed from 10,000 years of rigid doctrine, seemed to relish every unconventional tactic. Through their bond, Jake could feel its excitement. It was like watching a dog finally let off its leash after being chained up for years. They were in the middle of planning an absurd maneuver involving a black hole when the alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed across the Crithian command center. Officers started running in every direction, shouting in their clicking language. Beth burst into the room where Jake was staying. Her face was pale. Jake, we've got a problem. A big one. What's wrong? Long-range scanners just picked up a massive fleet entering Crithian space. It's them. The Devourers. They're here and they brought an army. Jake felt the Guardian's presence surge in his mind, combat systems already activating. Finally, the Guardian's voice rumbled. Let us show them what adaptive chaos truly means. Jake cracked his knuckles and grinned. Time to see if all that training was worth it. The Devourer fleet came out of hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Jake watched from the command center as the scanners lit up with hostile contacts. 300 ships. 300. All of them bristling with weapons, all of them heading straight for the Crithian homeworld. That's a lot of bad guys, Jake said quietly. The Crithian command center descended into chaos. Officers were screaming orders, trying to coordinate evacuations. Civilians were flooding into underground shelters. Parents grabbed their children and ran. Jake watched it all on the monitors and felt his stomach twist into knots. We cannot win this, the Crithian general said, his voice hollow. Guardian or no Guardian, the numbers are too great. We should surrender while we still can. No, Jake said. He stood up and headed for the door. Get your people to safety. I'll handle this. You'll die. Maybe. But I'm gonna make them work for it. 20 minutes later, Jake was inside the Guardian's chest cavity, strapping himself into what the Crithians called the neural throne. It looked like a dentist chair mixed with something from a science fiction movie. Cables and wires hung from the ceiling, all of them designed to plug directly into his nervous system. This is gonna hurt, isn't it? Jake asked. Only for a moment, the Guardian replied in his mind. The cables attached themselves to Jake's head, neck, and spine. Pain shot through his body like lightning. He screamed, then bit down hard to stop himself. The pain faded, replaced by something else. Connection. Deep, complete connection. Suddenly Jake could feel the Guardian's body as if it were his own. He could sense every system, every weapon, every crystal surface. When the Guardian moved its arm, Jake felt it like moving his own arm. 50 feet of crystalline war machine, and all of it responded to his thoughts. Okay, Jake breathed. This is incredible. Ready when you are, partner. Alright, big guy. Let's go show them why humans are scary. I await your chaos with great anticipation. The Guardian launched itself into space. The Devourer fleet was already entering orbit, their ships spreading out in a perfect military formation. Traditional combat doctrine said to establish a defensive perimeter. Set up a line, make them come to you, fight smart. Jake said screw that. He aimed the Guardian straight at the center of their formation and fired the thrusters to maximum. The Crithian military advisors watching from the ground were screaming at him to fall back, to be careful, to follow procedure. Jake ignored all of them. The Devourers didn't know what to make of it. Their battle computers were designed to predict logical tactical decisions. What Jake was doing wasn't logical. It was crazy. And that made it impossible to predict. The Guardian crashed into the middle of their formation like a meteor. Jake spun the massive body in a barrel roll, firing weapons in every direction. Devourer ships exploded. Others crashed into each other trying to avoid him. He used their own vessels as shields, grabbing one ship and using it to block incoming fire before hurling it at another target. Yeehaw! Jake yelled as they whipped around a nearby moon, using its gravity to slingshot forward. The added momentum let them punch straight through a dreadnought, tearing it in half like wet paper. Your battle cries are utterly ridiculous, the Guardian noted. You love it. Perhaps I do. But there were too many. For every ship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. The Devourers adapted quickly, coordinating their attacks, hitting from multiple angles at once. Jake dodged and weaved, but the Guardian's shields were taking a beating. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Then 4. Jake's head started pounding. The neural connection was intense, and maintaining it for this long was like running a marathon while solving calculus problems. Blood trickled from his nose. His muscles cramped. Every impact the Guardian took, Jake felt as phantom pain in his own body. 6 hours into the battle, Jake's vision was starting to blur. The Guardian's shield strength had dropped to 30%, 25%, and Devourer reinforcements kept pouring out of hyperspace. They just wouldn't stop coming. "We can't win this straight up," Jake gasped, wiping blood from his upper lip. "There's too many." "Retreat is acceptable," the Guardian said gently. "You have fought with courage and skill. No one could ask for more. We can withdraw, regroup, try again another day. And let these people die? No way." Jake's mind was racing, thinking through options, discarding them, thinking faster. Then he remembered something. A physics lecture from college. A crazy theory about dimensional rifts and FTL cores. "Wait, I've got one more stupid idea." He explained the plan through their link. The Guardian went completely silent for a long moment. When it finally spoke, there was something like shock in its voice. "Jake Webb. This violates 17 fundamental principles of Guardian combat doctrine. The risk of catastrophic failure is 97%. We would most likely die." "Yeah, probably. But if it works, we save everyone. Those are pretty good odds in my book." "You are absolutely insane. You chose me, remember? So, are we doing this or not?" Another pause. Then Jake felt something through their bond. Not just agreement. Pride. "Absolutely. Let us be insane together." Jake took a deep breath and started pushing the Guardian's FTL core beyond every safety limit it had. Warning alarms blared inside his head through the neural link. The ancient power source, which had been running smoothly for millennia, started screaming in protest. It felt like trying to force a car engine to run at 10 times its maximum speed. Through their connection, Jake could see the numbers. The Guardian's AI was calculating their odds of survival in real time. 3%. They had a 3% chance of living through what he was about to do. "Those are great odds," Jake said, his voice shaking just a little. "I once fixed a fusion reactor that had a 1% survival chance. This is practically guaranteed success." "You are completely insane," the Guardian said, but there was something almost like affection in its voice. "Hey, you chose me, remember? Little late to complain now." Jake manually rerouted energy from the FTL core through the dimensional stabilizers, but in reverse. This wasn't how they were designed to work. At all. It was like trying to make water flow uphill. Physics was screaming at him to stop. Every instinct told him this was suicide. But the math worked. In theory. Probably. They moved the Guardian into the exact center of the Devourer command fleet. The enemy ships were so focused on attacking that they didn't realize what Jake was doing until it was too late. He reached deep into the Guardian's power core and triggered the cascade. Reality broke. It started as a small point of darkness between the Guardian's hands. Then it expanded, tearing space itself like ripping a piece of paper. This wasn't a normal hyperspace jump point. Those were stable, controlled, safe. This was a collapsing dimensional rift, a wound in the universe that sucked in everything around it. The Devourer ships tried to scatter. Their pilots fired their engines to maximum, desperately trying to escape. But the gravity well was already forming, pulling them in like water circling a drain. One by one, their massive warships were dragged toward the rift. They fired their weapons at the Guardian, but the shots curved away, pulled into the void. Ships crashed into each other in their panic. Some tried to jump to hyperspace and vanished into the rift mid-jump. And through it all, Jake held the rift open, feeding it power from the Guardian's core. The strain was unbelievable. Jake felt like his brain was being squeezed in a vice. The neural connection wasn't designed to handle this much feedback. Blood started flowing from his nose. Then from his ears. His vision went completely white, then black, then white again. He couldn't feel his hands anymore. Couldn't feel his legs. "Stay with me, Jake Webb," the Guardian's voice boomed in his mind. It was flooding his nervous system with stabilizing energy, literally using its own power to keep Jake's brain functioning. "Not done yet." Jake forced the words out through gritted teeth. He could taste copper in his mouth. More blood. The last of the Devourer command ships vanished into the rift. Their entire leadership gone. Jake released his hold on the power core. The rift collapsed on itself with a sound like reality sighing, and then there was nothing. Just empty space where 300 warships used to be. The remaining Devourer vessels, the ones that had been on the edges of the formation, suddenly found themselves leaderless. No orders. No command structure. Just a giant crystalline monster that had literally ripped a hole in space and swallowed their entire fleet. They didn't stick around to see what else it could do. One by one they jumped to hyperspace and ran. Silence fell over the battlefield. The Crithian homeworld below was safe. Jake passed out. He woke up 3 days later in a medical bay. His head felt like someone had used it as a drum. Every muscle in his body ached. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Through the window he could see the Guardian standing in the courtyard outside. Its massive hand was pressed gently against the glass. Through their bond, which was still there, still strong, Jake felt relief so deep and profound that tears started running down his face. "You survived," the Guardian's voice whispered in his mind. "I was concerned. Takes more than dimensional physics to kill a web," Jake croaked, then coughed. His throat was raw. The aftermath was messy but predictable. The Galactic Assembly had no choice but to acknowledge the bond. Jake had saved an entire civilization. The Crithians built a monument in their capital city, a statue of a human mechanic standing beside a Guardian. The plaque read, "To the human who taught the Guardian to laugh." Other Guardians across the galaxy, dormant for centuries or millennia, started waking up. And they started seeking out humans. Not Crithians. Not any of the elder races. Humans. Something about humanity's chaotic, creative, never-say-die attitude called to them. 6 months later, Jake was back in his salvage yard like nothing had happened. Well, almost like nothing. The Guardian now stood among the piles of scrap metal and broken speeders, a 50-foot crystalline war machine that hummed contentedly while Jake worked. "Hey, hand me that wrench, would you?" Jake called out from under a speeder. The Guardian's massive hand delicately picked up the tiny tool and placed it in Jake's grease-stained palm. "I have guarded worlds for millennia," the Guardian said quietly. "I have fought in 1,000 battles across 100 star systems. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. And yet, this right here, helping you fix broken machines in your salvage yard, this is the most content I have ever been." Jake grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, well, stick around, buddy. I've got a freighter engine in the back that's making a weird noise. Gonna need your help figuring it out." "Excellent. I do enjoy your weird noises." Somewhere, in whatever realm the ancient builders existed, they would have smiled. Their Guardians had finally found what they were truly seeking. Not perfect warriors. Not vessels of destruction. But partners. Friends. Beings who saw them not as tools or weapons but as people. And sometimes that makes all the difference.